The European Union is not going anywhere. We are staying in Kyiv, we are staying with Ukraine. This is exactly how the EU ambassador to Kyiv, Katarina Maternova, responded to threats against diplomats and international organizations from Russia. The ambassador calls Moscow's appeal a masterpiece of hypocrisy and emphasizes, despite new threats from the Russians about continued strikes on the Ukrainian capital, Western diplomats will not leave the city. And the Kremlin's hysteria is not a sign of strength. It is a sign of desperation.
In fact, the latest shelling of Kyiv is Russia's reaction to its own public humiliation from its inability to protect its airspace. Paradoxically, with this attack, it humiliated itself even more. The Oreshnik fell near Bila Tserkva onto what Ukrainians jokingly call the United Garage Emirates, in fact, onto a garage cooperative.
And besides that, Putin is trying to divert attention from failures at the front. The armed forces of Ukraine continue successful counterattacks, strike strategic enemy military targets, and steadily destroy Russian logistics chains.
So why is the Kremlin threatening new strikes on Kyiv and calling for foreign diplomats to evacuate from there? How is Moscow trying to intimidate Ukraine and its partners? And how is the West's response to the Kremlin's scare tactics changing? Yevgenia Tereshchenko.
Even those in Putin's inner circle now admit the Russian economy has gone into a nosedive. The crisis is vaguely referred to as a negative effect of economic dynamics.
The situation in the economy is actually very difficult.
While the official named Oreshkin states the obvious, Russian troops are now launching yet another Oreshnik missile at Ukrainian territory.
Do you know what that is? Oreshnik.
The Oreshnik fell in Bila Tserkva, and the critically important targets reported by the Russian Ministry of Defense turned out to be garages.
The actual military significance is absolutely zero. An intercontinental ballistic missile is launched, which costs anywhere from several tens of millions of dollars up to $100 million. And in the end, it only manages to destroy 3 garages in a garage cooperative.
The Russians present this as yet another victory, which the Kremlin so desperately lacks, especially against the backdrop of no advances on the front and Ukrainian long-range sanctions.
The war, in principle, is already reaching rather remote corners of the Russian Federation, and strikes on Moscow have essentially become the cherry on top. Well, for Russians, this is a kind of outlet and an opportunity to rejoice a little that someone supposedly avenged them.
The so-called act of revenge cost Russian taxpayers a very great deal.
A total of 36 dummy warheads. There were, 6 independently targetable warheads. 36 holes in the ground, yeah. Okay, those vessels went very deep into the ocean. Most likely, this last launch was some kind of a very clear and deliberate warning signal.
The launch of a single Oreshnik missile is equivalent to 400 annual budgets of Kapustin Yar from where it is launched, or 3 years of expenditures for 2 ups familiar to Ukrainians. Overall, on the night of May 24th, Russia fired missiles at Ukraine worth approximately $700 million. Throughout the entire war, the Federation has struck Ukrainian territory with the Oreshnik missile 3 times.
One instance was in the Samber district in the Lviv region when it was used in January. It is still unknown what the reason was for launching it. In Dnipro, there were also minimal damages when it was first used against Ukraine in November 2024.
Now the Kremlin is threatening new attacks. The local Ministry of Foreign Affairs stated that Russian forces will systematically strike Kyiv, including decision-making centers and military-industrial facilities.
The main intelligence director had informed us that as of the 15th day of the month of April, they had a total of 10 individual Oreshniks currently held in reserve. Well, perhaps that number is a bit exaggerated because other sources reported up to 5 Oreshniks.
At the same time, an increase in Oreshnik production is possible, but that would mean a reduction in other Russian missile programs.
The production of one Oreshnik usually comes at the expense of not producing some other type of medium or long-range missile. We need to understand that the production of both Oreshniks and, say, Sarmats and other systems, including Iskanders, actually takes place at the same enterprises.
First and foremost, the intimidation with Oreshnik is aimed at Ukrainians. The enemy continues to terrorize peaceful cities.
It cannot have any impact on the situation at the front, on the front line, on the ground. So right now we are seeing an attempt to put pressure on the local population, on us, on the peaceful residents of various cities, so that we would go to the military and political leadership and start demanding that they accept the terms of peace dictated by the Russian Federation.
Moreover, after the strike, the Kremlin once again started talking about negotiations. They claim to have prepared proposals for the American plan to resolve the war. However, Oreshnik is a rather dubious argument in this regard.
If Ukraine was able to withstand pressure from the United States, I highly doubt that a few isolated incidents involving Russians using this missile could change the position of official Kiev.
Putin has once again started shaking the Oreshnik out of desperation to remind Europe and NATO about his nuclear potential. But instead of instilling fear of its might, the strike on Ukraine once again showed that Russia is a terrorist state. The European Union is preparing to respond to this political tactic of intimidation by increasing pressure.
For Russia, sanctions are a matter of survival. This is an issue that is much more important than, for example, restoring diplomatic relations or any kind of reasonable political dialogue.
At the same time, there is another goal. By launching the Oreshnik, the Kremlin is essentially testing this missile.
Since the Russian military forces continue to rigorously test and evaluate their military products in actual and intense combat conditions on the battlefield, this particular objective is probably the most significant and primary objective when we talk about the use of such sophisticated missile weaponry systems.
Meanwhile, such strikes on Ukraine remind our defense forces about legitimate targets on Russian territory.
We need to start with Votkinsk because that's where they're produced. And we need to start with Kapustin Yar. Well, these two hornets' nests need to be destroyed first and foremost.
Besides the Votkinsk plant, we can also take the time to mention the well-known Kremlin enterprise in Lipetsk, as well as various other companies involved in microelectronics production in the city of Zelenograd, which is located just outside of Moscow. They are all part of cooperative chains that are directly responsible for the production of Russian missile systems.
This way, Ukrainian drones and Flamingo will also force the Russians to reduce the production of cruise and ballistic missiles, which the Russian Federation uses to strike Ukraine. Yevgenia Tereshchenko, We Are Ukraine, Marathon United News.